Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm David Landsman. I'm a director of Tata Limited, and I represent the Tata Group in Europe. On behalf of the Tata Group, can I extend a very warm welcome to St James Court at Taj Hotel. You're in this evening for many experiences, but you're in for a double Tata experience, because of course we're here to celebrate the opening of Tata Elxsi's London Design Studio, but of course also the room we're sitting in the St James Court at Taj Hotel is itself part of the Tata Group, and Experience Squared, the recent rebranding of this hotel has been done by Tata Elxsi, so you just can't get away from us. Those two, Taj Hotels and Tata Elxsi itself, make up just two out of over 100 businesses in the Tata Group. We're a global group of over $100 billion, $20 billion of which is from the UK. So the UK is really a very important part of Tata's home. You'll know some of the others: Jaguar Land Rover, Tata Steel, Tata Consultancy Services, Tata Chemicals. I fear you may know some of them better than you know some of the others. In India, Indian journalists, I'm sure some of you know Indian journalists very well, they love cliches, and so they call us the salt to steel conglomerate. I should have mentioned, of course, Tetley in that list, and that's why I prefer from T to IT, and that's us too. But the focus tonight is very firmly on Tata Elxsi. I was actually had the good opportunity to visit Tata Elxsi's headquarters in Bangalore quite recently, and the labs there. And I think what makes the company unusual, if not unique, is the combination of creative design, the soft stuff, if you like, and if the gentleman to my left will forgive me, and the hard stuff, the hard electronics. There's a lot of talk, at least there is in the UK, about two cultures, the artistic and the scientific. And in the UK, at least, if not in India, a lot of talk about the crying need to boost the so-called STEM subjects and the STEM agenda. But maybe the real trick for the 21st century for all of us is to bring the two worlds together. And that's very much what Tata Elxsi is about, and that's the theme for this evening: humanizing technology. And I suppose we have to talk about humans, but we've really brought you a stellar cast to help discuss these challenges this evening. To my left, Sir John Sorrell is a champion of the creative industries with an immense influence on the UK's creative and cultural landscape over many years. He's a UK business ambassador for the creative industries, and we're really pleased to have a UK business ambassador with us, because we're in the UK, and when we're in the UK, we're a UK business. He's championing and promoting Britain's creative sector around the world. He founded and chairs the annual London Design Festival. With his wife Frances, he set up the Sorrell Foundation, aiming to inspire creativity in young people and improve the quality of life through art and design, and that's helping young people is something that's certainly very dear to our hearts too. And as part of that foundation, he initiated the National Art and Design Saturday Club, a UK-wide network through which young people can study art and design at their local colleges or university for free. He wouldn't have wanted me as a pupil, I'm sure. But there we are. Along the way, Professor James Woodhouse, Professor of Forecasting and Innovation at De Montfort University, which I'm sure has nothing to do with the weather. He's one of those rare people who makes predictions and gets them right. Back in 1981, he identified the user interface as a key issue in IT design, and I guess that's now something we take for granted. If you'd listened to him before 1999, you might not have invested so much in the dot-com boom, because he was the guy who predicted the dot-com bust. If you'd followed his advice, on the other hand, back in the early 2000s about 3G mobile technology, you would have been backing a winner. Head of the research design practice Fitch, he went on to lead IT consulting with the Henley Centre for Forecasting and to manage worldwide market intelligence for Philips Consumer Electronics. He broadcasts about the future of work and the environment. I suppose we have to do the former and we must care about the latter. And he sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Consumer Behaviour. And to my far left, Nick Talbot is the Global Design Head for Tata Elxsi. He's responsible for all the design initiatives for the Industrial Design Division and is responsible for IP portfolio creation across the company, including new product development and delivery. In his early career, he led projects including design of a production train for Bombardier, a concept show car for Ford, and the production of running prototypes of ENV, or ENV, I should have asked. ENV. Yeah. ENV, the world's first hydrogen-fueled motorcycle, which is a curious concept to me, but there we go.
And very scary too.
Oh, good, I'm pleased I'm right. More recently, he led the team that created the Air Cruise concept for Samsung Construction and Trading. Prior to Tata Elxsi, he was one of the senior directors at Seymour Powell, one of the world's leading design and innovation firms. So that's our panel. You've heard enough from me. I think you want to hear from them. I'm going to ask each one to say a few words to start us off, and then we'll go into a little bit more of a general discussion on humanizing technology. And if there's time, I'd very much like to bring in a few questions too. So the question, I guess, is how do we make sure that technology is serving us rather than the other way round? And the us, and I'm conscious of my age, it ought to be the whether we're young or old, technically minded or not. And as businesses, we're always hearing about the need for customer centricity. But how can we make sure this doesn't go out of the window when technology comes in through the door? Let me ask Sir John Sorrell to kick us off.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I ought to start by saying welcome. I'm a Londoner, so perhaps I could say on behalf of all the designers and people in the creative community in London, welcome to Tata Elxsi and congratulations on choosing the world's creative capital to set up your new studio. People have asked me why, and I do promote Britain around the world, as you can hear, and I promote Britain's creative industries, and people ask me why so many people come to London to set up their creative businesses. And I think there are probably three main reasons. The first is that it is the, I think, most multinational creative city in the world. I think there are more people from different countries who decide to come here and set up creative businesses than any other city I know. Secondly, in terms of design, I can count at least 30 plus design disciplines which are practiced to a very, very high quality indeed here in London. And the lovely thing about it is that they kind of cross-fertilize. There's a very interesting ecosystem. I think of it like a kind of greenhouse where I see people in architecture looking at and talking to people in, looking at the work of people who are doing jewelry design, different scales, same kind of thinking. I see people in product design talking to graphic designers. It's an extremely interesting creative community. And the third reason is something a little bit sort of deeper for me, which is the creative education system, which we can talk about till the cows come home tonight. But in fact, we do have a very long established and deeply embedded creative education system, which is under some threat at the moment. But I think with some clever thinking and some hard work, we can actually make it as good over the next 150 years as it's been over the last 150 years. The question, which is about technology and user interface, which James is much better at talking about than me. I just make one point about it. I think everyone thinks we're in the middle of an age of technology. You know, we had the agricultural revolution, the agricultural age, we had the industrial age. Now people say it's the technology age. I don't think it is at all. I think it's the creative age. And if you think about it as the creative age, where technology is the servant of creativity, then I think that's the right way round to consider all the issues. So you're not going to produce anything by staring into a screen. you have to make the screen do what you want it to do. So creativity is always going to be the most important thing. And my advice to anyone setting up a design company, either here in London or anywhere else, is get the most creative people you possibly can to work for you, because they will come up with the answers, and then technology will find ways to deliver. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. James.
James is actually the main event, and he's got a fascinating intro to this topic, humanizing technology. I'm only going to say a few words for 4 or 5 minutes or so, mainly because both of the gentlemen to my right have already said it. Thank you very much for the introduction to Tata Elxsi, David. I think the important thing for me as a designer, I've been designing things for about 25 years, is what always fascinated me was the speed with which an idea could get turned into something real. And the reason that Tata Elxsi, I've been with the company for 3.5 years, based out of Bangalore. The reason that the company, I think, is unique is that we've got a very specific and, I would say, very powerful capability in the technology space. And by technology, I don't just mean computing and 3G, 4G, 5G, or wireless, or all of the stuff that we operate in. Technology for me includes new materials, new manufacturing processes, new kinds of supply chain. And we've got people within the company that are able to prosecute projects in all of those areas. But where it gets interesting is if you also grow a very able design team full of people that do consumer insights, they find new ways of solving different kinds of problem. So the combination of those two things, a design and technology company, we believe is a pretty powerful thing. And the reason for that is that if we talk to our customers, you strip away the technology bit and, dare I say it, maybe even the marketing bit. What they're trying to sell, whether it's to consumers or in the case of business to businesses, is better experiences. And what I believe very firmly is that design can't do that on its own. There needs to be all the other stuff that goes with it. What's even more dangerous, if I may say, and I think this is to the point that was made a minute ago, is if technology and technologists also try and do it on their own. So I think we'd all agree our lives are full of pretty smart, pretty high-tech pieces of equipment that still manage to annoy the hell out of us, right? So we ain't there yet. There's been billions of dollars poured into convincing us that the latest, greatest gadget is the best thing since sliced bread. But there's a long way to go, in my view. So that's what Tata Elxsi does. We're about 4,000 people in different delivery centers across the globe. My team is a little bit less than 10% of that. So for a design group, it's actually pretty big. We've got about 350 odd people. And they operate in every domain that you can think of, from product design, consumer electronics. We recently set up a service design / experience design team, branding and graphics. We've got a very strong user experience team that's working cross-platform, whether that's mobile applications or automotive. So as a company, if you add that design bandwidth to the kind of capability that we've got in wireless and communications, we've got people that write the codecs, which are bits of code that probably sit on most of your phones, unbeknownst to you perhaps. So much of that work can be delivered from India, and we often say that we're a company that has its roots in India, but we are a global company. So, for example, about 90% of the whole company's revenue comes from outside of India, and we already have lots of clients and lots of projects in the UK, in Europe, in the US, in Korea, and recently we've opened an office in China. So India, the roots are there, but we are basically a global company. And what we've realized, and it didn't take too long to realize it, that if you're delivering just a technology project, it almost doesn't really matter where you deliver it from, whether it's from Bangalore or Addis Ababa, doesn't matter. But if we talk about design and innovation and people-centric things, then for our customers and our clients, we need to be in front of them. And being able to support our customers sometimes on a daily basis, I'm looking at deeper here, because we had a little micro panic recently with something where we had to be in communication on a daily basis to get the project done. For that reason, we need to be in Europe. As I said, we already have quite a number of UK and European clients. And put simply, we want to service those clients better. And of course, get some new ones as we go along. So, why London? I think that's already been said, and I completely support that. It isn't because I spent 16 years here. It's because we believe as a, let's say, a launch point for Europe and Scandinavia, maybe even the US, it's very well positioned, strategically positioned. But the most important thing is that this town is absolutely full of design talent in any of the domains that I mentioned earlier on. So the only way that we're going to be successful is if we hire the best people and grow that way. So that's why we're in London. I just want to make it very clear that our studio is not going to be let's say, an aircraft carrier that we will land some Indian designers into. We're investing in infrastructure, and we are going to be hiring local talent in London and in Europe. So I think continues a fine tradition of the Tata Group actually investing in the countries that they operate in. And that's very important to us because I don't think any innovation company can survive in a sort of monoculture. So we need to get more people from more diverse backgrounds into our organization so that when we say we're a global company, that's true actually at the cultural level. So that's the other reason that we have to be here. I guess a few words on the subject before I hand over to James. We thought long and hard about this idea of humanizing technology. And if I think about some of the projects that my team have delivered in the past couple of years, well, 3-4 years, for example, in water purification, we've done some pretty innovative work, which has not even included any electronics or software or coding. The reason that that achievement is so impressive is that the technology was essentially the filtration system, and all of the rest of it was just about simplifying that product to the point that people could afford it across India and Bangladesh and parts of Southeast Asia. So it isn't always the case that you get a big innovation or something that gives people a great experience by throwing electronics at it. This is my point about technology. It's very much about making sure that you just deliver what you have to. So for us, as a technology and design company, the idea of making sure that technology gets better for people is desperately important, because that's the way our customers will deliver a better experience. For example, when I hear about the Internet of Things or the Internet of Everything, I kind of think to myself, do I want my refrigerator to talk to my toaster, to talk to my washing machine? And then those devices will gang up on me and they'll send me an email. And the washing machine will say, I've been in this household longer than the other two and I want a promotion. I want to be vice president of laundry care and whatever. I mean, so it's not that technology is not an amazing transformational thing, whether it's in automotive or product design, consumer electronics, doesn't matter. But the sooner that designers get involved, I believe, the better the outcome will be. Because we've seen lots of examples where even people who are very creative technologists perhaps get so focused on the technology bit of it that they forget the people bit of it. So to conclude, and I believe this very firmly, you need both. And some people, I think there's a movement, isn't there, James, where so-called design thinking can solve everything, right? Just everything. If we want to solve some of the bigger problems, and this is very uppermost in the mind if, as I have, you've lived in India for a few years as a, let's say, an outsider, there are some really big problems, whether it's water or food security, obviously energy. You kind of get used to having power cuts nearly every hour. There's a lot to be done to improve not just, let's say, the developed world, but obviously there's lots of people still living in misery. And I don't think just designing your way out of that is going to work. There needs to be an application of relevant technology as well. So I think with that I've said enough, and I will hand over to James, who will amuse you.
Well, thank you, Nick, and I think the gauntlet has been thrown down by 3 heavy hitters already. I hope to come back to some of their themes. We could talk about how India is probably moving in a more entrepreneurial direction, but I'm not going to talk about that because the Indians know about it. We could talk about how Business Week, 20 years ago this November, celebrated the productivity increases that the internet could bring, something that we often forget in this rather febrile smartphone world where it's so much about entertainment and play and so on. And since Nick has been his lovely argumentative self and said that technology is not all about IT, I wanted first of all to defend IT, since our sparring must continue. We worked together at Seymour Powell back in the 90s. I think if you take what mobile phones are going to do next, maybe have an electronic nose to tell you whether the food is off or not. $80 already without a mobile phone on Amazon. Or we could go to Tiananmen Square and see the wonderful displays they have there, complete with the loudspeakers telling you what to think. But the displays are very impressive, and I think the world of displays, has really come on in the last few years, where a building can be a cinema screen, as in Pudong in downtown Shanghai, or where we have curved organic light-emitting diode televisions. I believe George Michael has bought one 8 meters wide, but then that's George. It's amazing what IT can bring, and not least in India, in Jamnagar, Gujarat, the largest oil refinery in the world, where Barco, the Belgian company, has introduced this kind of work environment where I'm sure you'll all be in an office like that in the next 10 years with any luck. And this is all something very much to celebrate. We shouldn't in any way underestimate just where IT has taken us and where it's going to take us. In Caterpillar, you can get into a virtual cab, make sure you're not running over a London cyclist, and then realize that you were never in London anyway. You were in Peoria, Illinois, which is about the same thing as being run over in the United States. And there are all these 3D printers that are getting cheaper and cheaper, and they play to an old love of mine, robots, 30 years ago, not 20 years ago in terms of Business Week, but 30 years ago at the Boiler House, the Design Museum. And those are becoming smarter. I won't go into that. But at your next brainstorming session, ladies and gentlemen, including even a Tata one, why not just give everybody in the breakout groups a $60 doodler pen to make sort of three-dimensional doodles. These are the things that are now in front of us. You know about what's happened with mobile payment in Africa, and they're ahead of Britain there in that regard. All these wonderful things. And maybe the thing you don't know is what Motorola is intending to do with your neck, which is to put a chip there. It's better than a tattoo, I suppose. And that will improve voice quality on telephones. But for really silly applications, we have to go to Dongjiang in China, where they're delivering books to 32-story flats, and in America, where they're delivering dry cleaning, but you need somebody to steer the drone as well. So left hand down a bit, no, that's your shirt. And, there are many things to celebrate here. So that's in defense of IT, with a silly end there. The point that Nick has already made, and I think we could come back to, before we come to the two cultures discussion that David and John have rightly introduced, the point that he's made, which I think is quite right, but does need underlining, is that technology cannot be reduced to IT. We love IT, but when Moody's, the rating agency, says, I love this, Senior Vice President Richard Lane, the technology sector held $638 billion worth of cash, that's another debate which we could have, or 39% of total corporate cash at the end of last year. This was March of this year. Followed by healthcare, pharmaceuticals, consumer products, and energy. I like that. This is the technology sector, which is basically Apple and everybody. And then there's all the people who don't do technology, like healthcare, pharmaceuticals, consumer products, and energy. Forget about them. They're just kind of, presumably, they're sort of the Godzillas of the products world. And I don't buy that. as Nick was just saying, I want to illustrate, there are plenty of products that do not rely on electronics, and that's not to take anything away from the very creative technologists that I know exist in Tata Elxsi and particularly in Bangalore, and now going to be supplemented in Britain by Nick's colleagues. So I'm pretty grumpy about this very one-sided kind of Wall Street view that technology is about IT and we can forget about the rest. Let me also say, while we're just sort of getting a bit critical here, there are three ways in which boosters of IT make a big mistake. And they don't do IT any favors. This is my real objection. First of all, I think those who had the illusion that the Arab Spring and all the other things were powered by Facebook should recognize some of the democratic realities that we face. Yes, we scan in the United States and everywhere else. I think Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook was very right to say that Facebook was neither necessary nor sufficient to bring about the sadly abortive change in Egypt that the last few years have experienced. But, you know, it's people that make Facebook. It's people that equip smartphones with content and with these subversive tweets. It isn't, as Nick was saying, I believe, just staring at a screen. No, it was John. Can't do it for you, and I very much agree with that. The second myth about IT is, as Nick has alluded to in his remarks about our annoyance with it, is this wonderful word, if I see it again I'm going to shoot it, seamlessness. You know, as I always like to joke, Italian tailors in 2,000 years have failed to make a seamless suit. So the belief that this can happen in IT is just a little bit foolish. And the third one, and perhaps the most important for our purposes today, is that the view of IT promulgated by American boosters, and I'm a partisan of America. I hope very much that your London office can do business there. But in this book, which I urge you all to read and reject, The Second Machine Age, they're saying that the Industrial Revolution was all right, but now we're in a second revolution period. We had the agricultural. They don't believe in the creative. John, I'm with you on that. We're in the second machine age, and it's all where machines become intelligent. If you read their prose, you begin to wonder about their intelligence, particularly as actually their new book is just a recycling of a book that they put out 2 years ago, not exactly an advertisement for innovation. But here they are, one's a Scandinavian and one is clearly from the East Coast. They're at MIT, and they write a bit better than Eric Schmidt, which is not saying very much. Just lost you a client there with Google. But the remarkable thing about this book, which I do urge you to have a look at, is it's being uncritically taken up until the new Piketty bubble that broke just the last few weeks by very clever people like Martin Wolf on the FT, who has revealed that he may be a good economist, but he understands nothing about robots and nothing about IT. And what distinguishes both the book and the Financial Times' endorsement of it is that while raving on about robots, neither of them have a single piece of statistics about robots. Well, that's left to poor saps like me. And if you look at the sinister World Robots Association or something like that, you'll see that obviously it all went down, the numbers installed after the Lehman Brothers crash. It's picked up a lot since then, but it's not exactly sort of showing what they love to call exponential growth, by which they should say, very fast at the moment. It's not even very fast. It's kind of 160,000 a year. It's not a great deal. Even if they took 10 jobs each, that would be 1.6 million jobs. Not a whole lot compared with 200 million unemployed around the world. So I think the most dangerous myth is that electrons themselves are not just democratic and always work out in a seamless way, but that they are intelligent. And I repeat the point, I think the speakers are in agreement on this, that it's human intelligence in philosophy, in aesthetics, in branding, and in many other things that is undoubtedly superior to even IBM Watson, which wins the Jeopardy quiz show. So that's my point against IT. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, I do want to uphold Tata Elxsi's ability to forecast trends, to understand consumer behavior, to understand, for example, the kind of thing that's blown up around Nigeria this week or Ukraine last week, and what it says about questions of maleness or femaleness or motherhood or religion or whatever it is, and how those sort of intersect with the way that we look at the world. I can't see even an IBM computer doing that. I can't see it having a sense of humor in product design, a robotic sense of humor. Imagine that. Doesn't exactly fill you with, he's writing it down. I can't get my students to do that. And you know, that whole sort of side of discernment, discrimination, not just computing, but judgment and self-awareness and insight seems to me to be likely to elude us from the world of computers for many years to come. Now, I want to just give a few examples of why the human side to technology, the design side, is important. And they don't just rely on IT for the reasons I've described. First of all, not in India. One problem that you don't have is you've got old people and they conduct themselves with a great amount of dignity, but you won't have as many old people as we will have for a bit of time soon. China will be older than you sooner than India will be. And if you go to old people, you don't have to be a nun or in Japan to like these Danish robots, which are in fact seal pups, and they're lots of fun. And already our ethics friends are debating, how does it feel to be deprived of one of those robots if you're an old person? Big moral question. You know, we've got about 60 of these robots around the world, but already people are worrying, it's posing profound ethical issues. And then the other people come in and say, well, how does a robot feel if it's deprived of a nun? Which really shows sort of, could we be kind of missing the plot here? Now, does anybody know who this is? Somebody else is taking notes. Thank you, sir. I'll have a drink with you after. Anybody know who this is, since we're talking old people and kind of medicine? Well, he was the Surgeon General in the United States, and he's a bit of a loon, actually. He was always dressing up in naval uniform and so on, and his name was C. Everett Koop, with a K. You know, he really was a rather odd person, but he did say one thing that was entirely right, which is, he's talking pharmaceuticals here, if you're not taking the tabloids, you're not getting the benefit. And so what we find is, and I've worked on this, I'm working with Novartis on this at De Montfort, is if you take something like packaging, and I know we've got a lady from Unilever here, you add some very simple electronics, and you get Tata Elxsi to simplify it, and you then put it in some rather naff pieces of cardboard and connect it to some Wi-Fi, and then eventually you give it the Bang & Olufsen treatment, where it's sort of giving you stereo instructions. Take that pill now. You forgot it last night, and so on. This is very important, what's called patient adherence to medical regimes. Electronics can play a role. You can order new drugs through your mobile. The GP can ring you up and say you didn't take the tablet and so on. That's very important. IT has a role to play here, but so, especially for older people, does some sense of style, some sense of friendliness, some sense of individuality, and all of that. A second example, outside pharmaceuticals, but again not at all in this case electronic, is a lady who I last met in this room, actually. It's where the International Energy Agency has its annual press conference. She's a fellow Dutch person. She looks very happy, but there's one very simple point that she makes, which is that there's very little research and development happening in energy nowadays. Very little compared with the 80s. The stuff that is happening is mainly around home insulation. Nuclear is way down. Fossil fuels was never much to write home about. It's mainly around renewables and even more about felt and wool and stuff you put in your loft. So much so that General Electric has actually left the nuclear business just a couple of years ago, and they're very unhappy with their whole energy business until they acquire Alstom. But they've lost confidence in nuclear, and they're not so happy about their old investments. This is Jeff Immelt in a happier year. I like to and now when's a computer going to do that? That's what I want to know. Only a wit could something like that. Now, if you look at what is happening in energy R&D, in Sandia, New Mexico, they're trying to take the CO2 out of the atmosphere by the old Victorian stocks of CO2 that we built up in the Industrial Revolution here. They're trying to suck that out of the atmosphere, heat it up with modular solar panels, and strip that CO2 of oxygen to hang on to the carbon to make new hydrocarbon fuels. And here's one of their modular operators. You don't have to be Roy Orbison to do this work. And that's very good, but it's just not looking frightfully user-friendly there. And if you look at the North of England version in Stockton-on-Tees, where they're doing the same thing, they're making a gallon of petrol every year from the CO2 that the industrial North belched out in the 19th century. This is the interior in which the cutting edge of energy research is now taking place up north. So when we're talking humanizing technology, guys, this is what I had in mind. Something needs to be done, and we need to recruit a new generation of nuclear engineers who will replace the older people who are now dying around nuclear plants, not through safety, they're just dying from natural causes. How are we going to recruit them? Well, we've got to make it a bit sexier than this. It's as simple as that. So if we want them to build small modular reactors that look like Lego and everything, we've got to make the interior, the man-machine interface, the woman-machine interface, if there's any difference, we've got to make it human, accessible, fun, insightful. We've got to have electronics in that. It ain't just an electronic question. Now, you could say, just to conclude, well, look, Jane, that's all very well, right? What you're really saying is you're putting forward a kind of mid-century, last century vision, even pre-war vision of industrial design, which is basically you get some nasty looking pipes, say in India or Oz, and they really are nasty, and if you want to irrigate India or Oz or Africa, you've got to do better than this. And what you're saying is you get Nick Talbot and Tata Elxsi, and they'll sort of smooth over the edges and, get rid of the wires, and they'll put a little Unilever brand on it or something like that, And that's a demeaning role for industrial design and product design. We're bigger than that now. You're not moving with the times, James. You're behind it all. Let me try to dissuade you from that little, what the French call autocritique. You could say, well, what you're really saying, James, is that when we deliver 1 million houses in 6 weeks after the Sichuan earthquake in China, you're there to kind of put the blue tops on the houses, or you're there to make sure that when they're making a 30-story hotel in China in 15 days, which is what they do down there, with modular construction and everything, you're making sure that the finished result looks just a little better than that to stay in, And actually, I make no apology for that, because, if you want to stay in that hotel, please go right ahead, because I'd rather be on a campsite myself. But let me say that the tasks for design, in terms of humanizing technology, are to do, for me, with the ethic that counts, the real ethic, not the robot ethics, which is that of progress. And that may sound old-fashioned, but somebody has to carry the torch for it nowadays, and I'm sure Tata Elxsi will do. And let me just give some examples of the new intercourse that I think design can have with science and technology. You can't see it too well here, but this is a map of where rare earths are around the world. You remember the controversy between China, the main producer of rare earths at the moment, and Japan 2 or 3 years back. It's probably going to get bigger, that controversy. If graphic design can evoke the origins and the mining opportunities and all of the other things around rare earths, the first thing that you learn, and this is a pretty weak example from the US Geological Survey of where rare earths are around the world, you find out they're not rare. Right? China may be making most of them at the moment, but in terms of the reserves, let alone the unexplored rare earths, they've got a hell of a long way to go, and there's plenty for everybody. They're not rare. Why are they important? Because you can build prototypes with these kinds of materials, and you can keep on experimenting with rare earths in plastic and all kinds of new materials to make the new designs, the new buildings of tomorrow. So we need to explain science in design. That's not done enough. It's not, if any of you can tell me what the Human Genome Project really looks like, I'd like, as we say in teaching, come and see me afterwards, right? Because I've yet to see a good piece of graphics on that. We need to prototype things, and designers, as much as engineers, can participate in that process. And finally, we need designers to advocate and explain why we need ambition in technology. Many critics have rounded on India for sending a probe to Mars, and even, if you please, for finding water on the moon. What we need is designers to explain and prototype and show a way forward which suggests that India needs all of those things. They are not just fun PR exercises or vanity projects. India needs them because if you want better agriculture, precision agriculture which detects the moisture on plants and sprays them accordingly, you need satellite telecommunications. India has every right and every need to develop that kind of capability, and all its space work will assist in that project. So the first of 3 tasks for design is to explain, to visualize, to prototype, to popularize, and to argue for technological advance. That's maybe not so difficult for you in India, but given that in Britain we want to ban fracking, ban the high-speed trains, and ban so many technological developments, then it's something that designers do need to do. And what we hear more often, as Nick has hinted, especially from some of Tata Elxsi's rivals, wonderful. That was a human moment there. Is what we hear so often is, you don't need just that technology stuff, it's just for boffins, and it's for nerds, and you need us to get in the beanbags and the post-it notes to kind of make it all groovy. But in fact, designers should be working hand in glove with technologists in the way that they do at Tata to celebrate and advance science and technology, to explain it to a skeptical and sometimes ignorant population. And those rare earths that I talked about, they're important in that, as an example of a material. They make permanent magnets that go into MRI scanners to check your brains, and they make the permanent magnets that go into motors, which if Hitachi is to be believed, will make you a much lighter car, a less fuel-burning car, and therefore a less carbon-intensive car. And, this is God's design with some electronics attached. It's a new kind of drone, but probably only a designer could think of something like that, where the beating of an insect's wings powers the chip that checks up on what you're doing, or checks up on agriculture a bit more positively. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in finding new applications for rare earths and for chips, designers are well placed to do that. I went to a Royal Academy of Engineering seminar, half-day seminar on raw materials, rare earths, graphene, carbon fiber, carbon nanotubes, and so on. There were no designers in the audience, only hard-bitten engineers, and what they all said again and again is, we need designers to turn our science into something useful for people. So they're gagging for it. They're gagging for it. I've never encountered so many people in white coat. Well, they were wearing a dark suit, but I imagine them in white coats, saying, we need the hippies and the designers and the Nicks, more seriously, and everybody else to tell us what to do with this stuff, because we don't know. We think it's great, but we can't apply it. So it is a role for designers, not just to advocate science and technology, but to work so closely with it that it comes into its own. It becomes a mass commodity item with stuff that really does make a difference, more than a difference, actually. And finally, there's one other role that design can play even more ambitiously with science and technology in this new intercourse that is needed between the two. And that is, if you go to the web and you search for graphene, and you ask Google, graphene images, this is about the best that you're going to get. You'll get a little sort of satellite there and some kind of, I don't know what that thing is down at the bottom there, and then a kind of lighter airliner and maybe George Osborne looking through a porthole. That's what you're going to get in terms of images for graphene, right? And if you think that's good, then try. These are number 1 and number 2 when you go graphene images. This is what you get, right? And it's got something to do with air fighters, maybe microscopes. A chip is involved. That's it. So nobody's explaining it really properly. Nobody's applying it very much. And above all, the design world's ability to inspire new scientific progress and new technology, to direct it, to apply it, to get scientists and technologists to strengthen their breadth of vision, to get them to realize that when people say to them, we tried that and it didn't work, that they are in a strong position working with designers to say, well, it will work this time. Then that would be a great step forward. So there is another role which isn't supplicatory and just clothing things in nice aesthetics, but which is actually helping to drive science. It can't do it on its own, science. Design can't do it on its own. Design can't just drive science and say, we're the masters. But there can be that mutually inspiring balance between the two that I think will bring progress, both of a technological and of a human interface kind. So the guy I want to leave you with is a fellow Dutchman. I don't know if any of you know. Anybody know Willem Kolff? Yes? No? No, that's you, sir, I was looking at, but never mind. He was a Dutchman, very brave guy. He was a Christian. He hid a lot of Jews during the Second World War, which, if you know your Dutch history, is extremely dangerous. And in 1945, he invented the world's first kidney dialysis machine. And even more interestingly, he gave it to a Nazi woman because the war was over. And if you're a doctor, you're not supposed to discriminate. How did he make that dialysis machine? He used sausage skin and the parts from fallen Luftwaffe fighters. And he got hold of those Luftwaffe fighter parts and somehow he clothed them in sausage skin. And the result was medical progress. And then about 30 years later, a bit more, he developed the world's first artificial heart, and there was a big ethical outcry about that, and here he is standing with them. Well, what Nick's going to do in London and around the world is going to be better than sausage skins and Luftwaffe parts. But I think the design ingenuity of this Dutchman, I make no patriotic claims here, is the stuff that is to die for. Let's have more of that. Let's have more design-orientated scientists and science and technology-orientated designers who can lash up the most outlandish things and make people with kidney disease live, and make people with heart disease live. That, for me, is romance. So let's hear it for the romance of design, science, and technology. Thank you.
James, thank you very much indeed for filling us with inspiration. I'm a bit nervous. I'm not sure whether there's two possibilities when I leave tonight. I'm going to go away either as a committed advocate of the merits of design, or when I get home I'm going to say to my wife, well, there was something about a nun and a seal, and can't quite remember what it was all about. I suppose the thought that's in my mind and what's worrying me, because I'm not sure which side I'm on yet, is all this wonderful design has got to actually be for slightly less wonderful people like me who can't quite make their minds up what the nun and the seal was all about. And I suppose the humanizing design bit has got to be for people who are only human. And I see now, I've just got used to emails and think they're wonderful. And I'm told they're already going out of fashion. And the more technology there is, and the more that there are generations who've grown up with technology that some of us are still trying to get to grips with, the more difficulty there's going to be in making things and systems and services that really work for mere humans. And I just wonder whether any of our panel would like to give some thought on how we're actually going to make sure that you guys don't go too far away from people like me with my nun and my seal, as it were.
Yeah, I think I probably will be on the side of the nun and the seal when we're done with this evening. To answer your question, there's two things. I think first of all, there's a lot that's talked about organisations being customer centric, or the buzzword being customer centric. Actually, the role of a designer, I think, one of the really important roles is when you get into the stage of any endeavour or any project where somebody wants to pull the knife out, either because they want to get it done quick or they want to cut costs, or there's lots of reasons why products and services and things end up being less good than they might be, or less human than they might be. And yeah, having the insight in the first place and maybe doing some innovative thinking is less than half of a job of a designer. The really tough bit is making sure that all the way through, that bit of consumer insight or that bit of customer centricity, or the delight that was, let's say, bound up in that first concept when a client says, yeah, I love that one, we're going to make that one. And 6, 8, 10 months down the line has been mangled to the point that it's probably worse than the thing that was presented in the first place. So, a fantastically important role of design is to say, I understand where you're coming from, but we ain't going to do it that way. Either we're going to tear it up and we're going to start again because we've learnt about all of these constraints, but if you do what you're going to do, I'm telling you now, it's going to be a disaster. So the role is actually to defend the original vision, even if we understand lots and lots of constraints. Much of the time, I think the role of a designer is to say, we've got this far and you're probably trying to do too much. Why don't we simplify things and strip it all away so we deliver that amazing experience. Maybe it's only one experience, not 4, but what we delivered is something good and not something rubbish. So the understanding you, David, from day one, and making sure that what we ask you to pay for, whether it's a product or a service at the end of it, has got some connection with what David said he wanted at the beginning, and what he didn't want, is very much what design is here to do. And seals.
Does this work? Yeah. Common sense is quite a large part of this. I spend a lot of my life just in amazement at how people can get it so extraordinarily wrong. We bought a DVD player on Saturday to replace one we've had for quite a long time, and it broke several months ago. And there was something we wanted to watch on DVD, so my wife went out and bought one, and I couldn't believe how cheap it was, because last time they were about £50,000, and now it was £60. And she said I could have got one cheaper in Asda. But anyway, there it was, and so took it out of the box, and we've got a little shelf under our television where I took the old thing out and I put the new one in. And then I needed to get it to work. So it was all plugged in, absolutely fine. And I was then reminded of Prince Philip, interesting link, who is a great patron of design, and I won't tell you about all the different things he's done over the years to help design. But he used to tell a story about his problems with his DVD player. And I remember he said, I tried to get this bloody thing working. And the thing is, it's on right low down, so I'm lying on the floor on my stomach. But I can't, and I've got a torch and a magnifying glass in order to see what the buttons and what you're supposed to press. And he says, it's completely ridiculous. Well, it is, isn't it? How could you possibly design something which is so user-unfriendly? And then why is it that these things are always low down on the floor, so you have to lie down to work them? It's completely crazy. 2 other quick stories, which emails, you mentioned emails. A friend of mine who was the marketing director of a very, very large corporation, many years ago when people started getting emails, we were out at lunch one day and he said, do you have these things called emails? And I said, yeah, everyone does now. And he said, yeah. He said, it's really interesting. He said, 6 months ago, they brought this computer into my office, and they said, this is so you can get emails. And I said, great. And he said, last week, my secretary said to me, how are you getting on with your emails? And he said, I don't know. And she said, well, have you been getting any? He said, I don't know. So she said, let's go and look. And she came and tapped the machine, and it turned out I'd had 220,000 emails in the last 6 months. And he said, doesn't seem to have made any difference that I haven't actually seen them. And I think that's interesting. The other thing, this is just a kind of, I got an email. I got an email at the weekend from a friend of mine in Hong Kong with a little video about photocopiers. Anyone here use a photocopier? I mean, one of the big ones, proper big photo. Your corporation's got them in your offices? What happens when you get rid of it, when it's obsolete? Do you know what happens?
Knacker's yard.
You go, yeah, they go your people, I'm sure you don't do this, your people dispose of it and they buy a new one. So I could send you the link to this email. These people investigating this in America bought 3 photocopiers from a second-hand photocopier shop. And this shop had about 300, and they just chose 3 at random. And then they took them back to their office, took them apart, and then they took out the little device which is inside the photocopier, which has got a record of every single photocopier the machine has ever done. And you then plug it into your laptop, you then download the program for free off the internet, and you can print out or just look at every single photocopier the machine's ever done. 2 of the ones they bought at random were from the local police department. And the other one was from a local hospital. Really extraordinary. And I'm actually, the other thing I do, I'm chairman of UAL, University Arts in London. And as soon as I saw this, I rang up my vice chancellor and said, God, and he went, oh, God, not another problem. So he then came back to me 3 days later triumphantly and said, our compliance people know about this, and they take this thing out and shred it from every single photocopier that we get rid of. So there's a program, there's a thing you can do, it's like wiping. It's like wiping your lap, but you can. So we now will have to wipe our photocopiers because everything of a photocopy is recorded inside them. So I'm really interested. I'm incredibly interested in technology. I'm really interested in scientific advancement. I'm also really interested in common sense. And designers, one of the most amazing gifts that designers have very often is extraordinary common sense. They just ask the question. This is an old chestnut, and James knows the answer to this, but how many people does it take to change a light bulb? The designers one is, how many designers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, does it have to be a light bulb?
I think I've said enough, and I'm sorry you didn't quite follow the seal pups there, David. We'll have a drink about that, but. I think one point Nick made is if you go back to the Harvard Business Review, in around 1990, you'll find a very famous article at the time, largely forgotten now, called The Power of Product Integrity by Kim Clark and Takahiro Nashimoto, something like that. And they coined the phrase in that article, the heavyweight product manager. And the heavyweight product manager, who was typically in the car industry, because that's what they studied, it's a Harvard Business School Press book all about this, is the person who does what Nick said, which is holding to the concept, no matter how many darts are thrown at it or how many tweaks are made to it, so that one benefit, including John's common sense, and prompting even David's curiosity, but not in the Prince Philip sense. The heavyweight product manager can hold on to that and defend it, can advocate it. And I try to play out advocacy for design, right? The expressive, argumentative, political, oratorical, and also literary role that designers can and should play. And historically they did, because all the great designers that I ever interviewed before they died, it's so much easier to do it before they die. Raymond Loewy, Saul Bass, Douglas Scott, who did the Routemaster bus. All of these really heavy cats. They were all good speakers. They were all good writers. Wally Ollins, James Pilditch, and the late Wally Ollins. They knew how to put forward a point of view. It was a commonsensical point of view, and it was a point of view that in those days really did connote progress. I think we've lost a bit of that in our fascination with electronics, even with our fascination with 3D printing. The ability to convince people to hold fast to a difficult but simple, commonsensical cause, that is a big power for design. If we can get it back and we can use it to help bring forward the intelligent, genuinely intelligent applications of science and technology, then we will have done more than make a difference. We will have helped change the world. And that's what designers have to do. You know, they are people who, George Bernard Shaw said that, you know, the person who wants to change the world is somebody who is not much liked a lot of the time and is unreasonable a lot of the time. And that's what designers have to be. If they're not iconoclastic, not for the sake of it, but because the world needs changing, then they might as well play around with sellotape or stay in a regime of beanbags and post-it notes. Let's get out of those regimes and put forward the case for more water in India, more irrigation everywhere, and even some seal pups for those of us reaching our old age.
Thank you so much. Right. I did say I would give the chance one or two questions from the floor or from the table, so I shall do that before I get more obsessed with seal pups. Are there any couple of questions, couple of thoughts? I don't know if we have a microphone down there, but I don't think we need one. You don't need a microphone, do you?
No, thank you. Going back to the concept of common sense, the area within which you explore, you invent, you bring about change, and how does that relate to common sense, even if you're part of the same kind of sphere in a way?
Sorry, so a question about ethics and common sense and how they relate to each other and to design. Who'd like to pick that one up? In three words.
Well, I've got a prop which will help the others. You may have noticed this is the lightest champagne bottle that I've seen in a bit of time, and for me it speaks to the power of the unethical, and let's celebrate that. You know, what's wrong with a bottle of champagne? What's wrong with having some great packaging where the bubbles become metal that isn't metal or a bubble? Right? And that's technology, it's design, I'm dying to have a drink, I'm sure you are. So for me, this is where common sense meets ethics, in fact, right? It's not an ethic that says you can't say that, you can't do that, that's going to destroy the planet, that's very bad, that's only for rich people, because even a tramp would like to play with this, right? It's terrific. And it's progress. It's put materials to new effect. It's evocative. It advocates bubbles, you know, without my kind of verbiage. So that, you know, for me, there's no contradiction necessarily between common sense and ethics. Now, Tata didn't design it. Unilever didn't make it. It's still great.
Thank you. Another question. One more question.
I suppose my issue is how you get the balance right between a kind of technophilia and a technophobia. Because to use, dare I say, the seals and the elderly nuns, there is undoubtedly in the UK, as people from here will know, something of a crisis of compassion in relation to how we deal with the elderly. And you can just see that some people will say, well, what we need to do is to give everyone a seal pup and a robot and all will be solved. And we kind of suspect that that's not true. It's also true that there'll be other people who say we are showing that our lack of compassion, or our lack of compassion is created by all these robots doing it instead of humans. And that's obviously not true. So how do you kind of get that balance right politically, as it were, in the conversation? And I suppose just the underlying bit is that in the end, the seals are great technology, great design, but you know, in the end, I can't help but feel that what I really want is a productivity increase, which I know that James referred to, but you know, in the end, what I really like is technology to mean that I've actually got, you know, R&D that means I don't have to work as hard for more money so that I've got time to go and look after my elderly, you know, play with the seal of my elderly mother, if you see what I mean. So rather than all the technology into solving our problems directly, that actually it gives us more free time and leisure to do the human things. That's one thing that's a great consequence of technology.
Technophilia versus technophobia, how's it going to give us more free time?
I think the way that you framed that is wonderful, because for example, the number of people that have said, and there may be some truth in this, or it may be part of the solution, that the future of healthcare is going to be a couple of things that you stick into an iPhone, and you'll probably never meet a human being, because it will, you know, send the data without you even knowing it, and then you'll get a text saying you're nearly dead, please take your pills, or whatever. So the only, let's say, advocacy that I can give for designers, I mean, ultimately a good designer has to be a humanist, is not to charge towards technology in the first place, and perhaps not look for the, let's say, the first and most obvious solution, which is that you write an app and then you stick something on the iPhone that you stick on your neck or what have you. Being able to pull, as we used to say, right up to 45,000 feet and look at the whole system and look at every interaction and work out the most efficient way of doing the right thing, I think is where you can get that balance between where you should use technology, whether it's to give you more time to do what you need to do, or whether it's to make the health service itself more efficient, so the human beings that are taking care of grandmother can do more grandmothers. Maybe it includes some seals, maybe it doesn't. But the important thing is not to charge into any one solution without looking at the whole system. And what we know is that whether it's in healthcare or automotive or what have you, for some reason, everything seems to be getting more complicated, and there are more demands on everybody to do everything the whole of the time, whether it's taking care of kids and grandmothers and being a success at work and, you know, what have you. So for me, the intervention of design is at its most powerful when, maybe not in detail, you can understand all of the elements in a system and try and work out where the most efficient solution is. And if you, whether it's an iPhone or a seal, it doesn't really matter. The point is there will be places where technology can be used. But if I may, I think a technologist would immediately charge to that, the robotic solution, as the Japanese did with the original Aibo dog. That was invented for the best of reasons. It was a puppy for old people who actually couldn't walk the dog or clean the poo up. So you know, give it a robot. And then it went out of production because quite a lot of elderly Japanese said, I don't want your stupid dog with its flashing lights. I'd rather either watch TV or have a real one, or send me someone who can take me out in my wheelchair and sit in the park. I don't want your robotic dog, so that's why it died off.
Well, I hope John will come back, and David, but I think Claire Fox, because that's who she is, raises a very important issue, which briefly, with one of those acronyms that we've had to adopt, Nick referred to, which is what he calls B2B, which is business to business. And the kind of design that goes not for smartphones or even for sealed pups, but in the design of a hospital, the design of its signage, the ability to put up a hospital like that Chinese hotel in 15 days. That is what I think you're referring to in productivity increases. And it's very interesting. I was just looking at the numbers yesterday. British output of capital goods has risen by 20% in the last year or two, which is quite astounding. You know, we all thought manufacturing, except for JLR and Tata Enterprises, but capital goods is not what we thought we were doing. It's down in pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's really up in capital goods. The design of capital goods, and a hospital is only a large version of that, is, you know, absolutely critical. And I hope Tata does a lot of work and a lot of advocacy around that key productivity raising work that design can do in tandem with technology. Let me just say that in hospitals, around 9, 10 or 11% of a nurse's time is spent trying to find out where the photocopier is or where the x-ray machine is. It's not done in nursing. It's saying, well, the last time I saw that radiography machine, it was on the 6th floor, but I think somebody's recycled it at the local police station. So you probably can't find it. Go have a look somewhere else. If we bring in radio frequency identification tags and we make sure that the wireless system actually works with them, because there's a lot of problems still with that, then the nurse will be able to go nursing, not go looking. Right? And it's Nick's job to make that tag work in that product on a display for the nurse so that she said, oh yeah, it really is on the 7th floor, and go get it and be more humanistic as a result.
You know, for me, the interesting thing, my colleague Narendra, who's sitting at the front here, did a service design audit of a big private hospital in Delhi recently. So, and there is a lot of opportunity to improve service design and experience design in hospitals. One of the biggest problems is not losing your x-ray machine, is losing patients. And I don't mean patients as in I'm fed up of working in healthcare. So if you're clinical staff and you assume that there's your next 4 patients outside in the waiting room and you've done your job and you got through it and you're ready to find them, and you go out and there's no bugger there. So where have they gone? Suddenly you've then got to go and find a mobile phone, or you've got to speak to a colleague and say, are they having a smoke? Have they gone to have some food? Has the car parking run out? Where have they gone? So the application of some kind of non-invasive technology where you can track people or you can get hold of them very quickly and say, come now, or your slot's finished. All of that stuff in these complex systems has not really even begun to be solved. And it's always the basic stuff. Who's moved the photocopier? Who's moved the patient? Have they moved themselves? And suddenly some very capable and quite expensive people have lost an hour of productivity. So all of that needs to be fixed.
I'm sure people are dying for a drink, but I just add something to that. I was at North Middlesex Hospital recently for an eye test, and I arrived there, I went to reception, and they gave me a little piece of plastic, and they said, go and sit down, and when the doctor's ready, this will bleep. So I went and sat down, and sure enough, about half an hour later, it bleeped. The trouble is, they didn't tell me what to do when it bleeped. And well, I sort of guessed what you could do, but because I'd been watching what was going on when other people's bits of plastic bleeped, and everyone was amazed. Goes, oh. Look around. And then the staff came out irate because someone whose bit of plastic had bleeped hadn't gone to the correct room. So it's a great idea, but it didn't quite work. And I think that I've had quite a lot to do with design in hospitals, and there's so many terribly simple things. Why do lots of elderly people in this country get very, very, very badly dehydrated when they're in hospital? They're lying there in the bed. Why do they get really dehydrated? And the answer is it's because they're from a generation where they don't like to ask. So when their water runs out, they don't like to ask the nurse to get them more water. Simple as that. So how do you design against that? Common sense. What you've got to do is, instead of giving them a plastic jug with a glass of water, what you give them is some kind of water dispenser. Build it into the bedside cabinet. Cool water, enough water to get you through a day without the container having to be refilled. All this technology exists. It's actually not really that difficult. And I think you're going to finish now. I'd just like to finish again by saying it's a very interesting conversation. This is a conversation really for a conference which goes on for a couple of days rather than a quick evening reception and a drink. So I'd like to say thank you to my colleagues who I think have been brilliant tonight. Thank you, all of you. And I'd like to say congratulations going to Tata for choosing London.
Thank you very much. Well, I think now I'm going to go home. When my wife says, what was all that about? I'll say it was all common sense. So I think that's probably a better answer. And I thank So I've done the right thing, have I? Good. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to everyone for coming this evening and for the questions too. Please have another drink. And I look forward to seeing everybody again, because since Tata Elxsi's new studio is in the same building as my office, I'm assuming everybody's going to be coming round soon, so look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.